In the small border village of Ashwick, there lived a girl named Lyra who had never once been told she mattered. She had grown up without parents, without a pack, and without a single soul who claimed her as their own. As a baby, she had been found outside the healer's hut, wrapped in a plain gray blanket with no note and no name. The healer had taken her in out of pity, not love, and raised her just enough to keep her alive. By the time Lyra turned 6, she was already working. She swept floors, carried water, and mended torn clothes for families who barely looked at her twice. The village had a strict order to it. Alphas led, betas supported. Omegas were cherished, paired young, and protected by their packs. That was how it worked everywhere else. But Lyra was different. She was an Omega with no pack behind her, and in Ashwick, that made her almost invisible. The other Omegas her age had already been claimed by the time they turned 16. They wore soft wool shawls gifted by their mates and walked through the market with quiet pride. Lyra wore patched clothes and walked with her eyes down, used to the whispers that followed her. "She barely has a scent," one woman said once, loud enough for Lyra to hear. "No wonder no one wants her." "Probably something wrong with her blood," said another. Lyra had stopped correcting them a long time ago. She had stopped hoping, too. Hope was expensive, and she could not afford it. Instead, she focused on small things. The way morning light touched the top of the hills, the comfort of finishing a full day of work without collapsing from exhaustion, the quiet satisfaction of a warm meal, even if she had cooked it herself with no one to share it. She told herself this was enough. She told herself this every single day. On the morning everything changed, Lyra woke before sunrise, just like always. She fed the goats, gathered eggs, and filled 2 large buckets of water from the well behind the village hall. Her arms ached by the time she reached the square, but she had learned long ago not to complain. Complaining did nothing except invite more whispers. She noticed the village was unusually busy. People were sweeping their doorsteps and straightening their clothes. Children who normally ran wild were being pulled inside and scrubbed clean. Something important was happening, though no one had bothered to tell Lyra what. "The king is coming," a boy finally said, breathless, as he ran past her. "King Draven himself. He's inspecting the northern border villages." Lyra had heard of King Draven, of course. Everyone had. He ruled the northern packs with a firm and fair hand, respected by allies and feared by enemies. People said he had not taken a mate in all his years of reign, despite the pressure from every noble family hoping to secure the bond. Some said he was waiting for someone specific. Others said he simply did not believe in it. None of that mattered to Lyra. Kings did not notice servant girls. She set her buckets down near the well, wiped her hands on her apron, and prepared to disappear into the background, the way she always did when anyone important came through. The king arrived at midday with 50 warriors behind him, their armor catching the sunlight, their black and silver banners snapping in the wind. The entire village gathered in the square, kneeling as he passed. Lyra knelt too, at the very back, half hidden behind a stack of crates. King Draven moved through the crowd with the calm control of someone used to being obeyed without asking twice. He spoke briefly with the village elder about border defenses and grain supplies. His voice was steady and low, carrying easily across the square. Then, without warning, he stopped walking. His head turned, slowly, toward the crowd at the back, toward Lyra. She froze completely, certain she must have accidentally caught his eye by standing wrong, breathing wrong, existing wrong. She quickly ducked her head lower, hoping he would simply move on. He did not move on. Instead, King Draven walked directly toward her, his warriors exchanging confused glances behind him. The crowd parted, whispering, unsure what was happening. Lyra felt her heart pound so hard she feared everyone could hear it. "Stand up," the king said, his voice gentler now, though still carrying that same unmistakable authority. Lyra rose on shaking legs, keeping her eyes low. As she stood, her sleeve slipped slightly down her forearm, revealing a small section of skin near her wrist. She barely noticed it herself, but King Draven's entire body went still. There, faint beneath her skin, was a mark. It was intricate, made of looping lines that curled into themselves like an old symbol from a forgotten language. Lyra had always had it. She barely thought about it anymore, assuming it was simply a birthmark, one more strange thing about a girl no one wanted. But now, right in front of everyone, the mark was beginning to glow. A soft silver-blue light rose beneath her skin, faint at first, then stronger, pulsing gently like a heartbeat made visible. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lyra stared down at her own arm in confusion and disbelief, unsure if she was imagining it. King Draven pulled back the sleeve of his own coat, revealing his wrist. There, in the exact same pattern, was a matching mark, one that had been part of him since birth, silent and unexplained his entire life. It too was glowing now, brightening in perfect rhythm with hers. The village elder stumbled forward. "Your Majesty, forgive me. This girl is no one of importance. She has no pack, no family." "Enough," King Draven said, his voice sharp enough to silence the entire square instantly. He knelt down in front of Lyra. An alpha king knelt in the dirt of a border village, in front of a servant girl who had spent her whole life being told she was worth nothing. He took her wrist carefully, turning it so the mark faced the light. It glowed brighter still, warm and steady, as though finally allowed to breathe after being hidden for 20 years. "This is the mark of the bonded," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I have carried it since I was born and never understood it. My advisors told me it might never awaken, that I might live my whole life feeling like something was missing and never know what it was." He looked up at her, his golden eyes searching her face. "It was you. It was always you." Lyra could not find words. Her throat felt tight, her mind spinning too fast to catch up with what was happening. "I don't understand," she finally whispered. "I'm nobody. I don't have a pack. I don't even have a real name people use with kindness." "You have a name," King Draven said firmly. "Lyra. And from this moment, you have a pack, because you have me." He rose to his feet, still holding her hand gently, and turned to face the crowd, his voice carrying across the entire square. "This village saw a mark on her skin only when it began to glow, but a mark like this does not create worth. It reveals what was already there." The villagers who had whispered about her for years now knelt in stunned silence, unsure how to process what they were witnessing. The same woman who had once said Lyra barely had a scent now stared at the ground, unable to meet anyone's eyes. King Draven turned back to Lyra. "You do not have to decide anything today," he said, his tone softening. "I am not asking you to become my queen, because tradition says a mark demands it. I am asking you to let me know you, to learn who you are beyond what this village decided about you before you ever had a chance to speak for yourself." For the first time in longer than she could remember, Lyra felt something other than exhaustion settle into her chest. It was fragile, uncertain, but it was there, something like hope. "I would like that," she said quietly. That evening, King Draven ordered his warriors to make camp just outside the village, refusing the elder's offer of the finest house in Ashwick. Instead, he asked to sit with Lyra near the well, where she had spent so many mornings, and asked her to tell him about her life. Not the version the village told about her, but her own version, in her own words. She told him about the healer who raised her without warmth, but without cruelty either. She told him about the years of feeling invisible, of learning to expect nothing so she would never be disappointed. She told him about the small joys she had found anyway, the sunrise over the hills, the comfort of survival, the quiet strength it took to keep going without anyone cheering her on. King Draven listened to every word without interrupting, his expression unreadable, but his attention completely unwavering. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You have spent your whole life being underestimated," he finally said. "And still you did not become bitter. You did not become cruel. That takes a strength most people never have to test." He looked at her carefully. "I would be honored to spend the rest of my life learning the rest of your story." Lyra felt tears rise in her eyes, unfamiliar and warm. "No one has ever wanted to hear my story before," she admitted. "Then everyone before me made a terrible mistake," he said simply. Over the following weeks, King Draven remained near Ashwick longer than his original plans required. He visited Lyra daily, sometimes bringing warm bread from the camp kitchens, other times simply sitting with her in comfortable silence while she finished her chores. Slowly, the villagers who once dismissed her began treating her differently, though she noticed the change came more from fear of the king's disapproval than genuine understanding. She did not mind. She was no longer looking for their approval anyway. When the time came for King Draven to return to his kingdom, he asked Lyra to come with him, not as a servant, not as an obligation tied to an old symbol on her skin, but as someone he had chosen to know and wanted to keep choosing every day after. Lyra looked back at Ashwick one final time, at the well she had visited 1,000 mornings, at the village hall floors she had swept without thanks, at the faces of people who had spent 20 years deciding she was worth nothing. Then she turned toward the road ahead, toward a king who knelt in the dirt for her, toward a mark that had finally been allowed to shine. She did not leave as the girl the village had ignored. She left as someone who finally understood her own worth had never depended on anyone else seeing it first. It had simply been waiting for the right person to look.